What's up guys, it's Tommy here and welcome to a brand new video where we will take a look at why it's more and more likely that Man City could get relegated and their titles could be stripped in this video. And we have a very detailed thread on the topic by the Swedish Rumble. It's a Man United fan Twitter account, but I really highly recommend following him because he does some brilliant analysis on the biggest and hottest topics around football. And he's saying that it must now be expected that Manchester City will get expelled from the Premier League after, for really small breaches, Everton and Nottingham Forest got big point deductions. Everton got a 6-point deduction and Nottingham Forest got a 4-point deduction. So if you like this new format with a lot more information and graphical presentation in my videos, make sure to leave a like. Let's get this video to 100 likes with your help and I will keep making these videos. And make sure to leave your comments down below. What should be Manchester City's punishment? What kind of punishment do you think would deter other clubs in the future to cheat like Manchester City? But first we need to highlight another issue, and that's why there has never been a time where it's more evident that state ownership should be absolutely banned in the Premier League. A country owning a football club always brings up issues in politics, and this is very dirty that the UK government has admitted to the Athletic news outlet that the UK embassy in Abu Dhabi and the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office have discussed the charges leveled at Man City by the Premier League, but they are of course refusing to disclose the correspondence, the communication, what exactly was talked about, because it could risk UK's relationship with the United Arab Emirates. And that's the biggest problem with state ownership. If a country is owning a Premier League football club, it can put pressure through its various channels in politics and in business. And the United Arab Emirates, who own Man City, have various big contracts with the UK government. They own a lot of businesses, they own a lot of buildings, so they can threaten and blackmail the UK government into forcing the Premier League to not punish Manchester City. And as you can see, the news outlet Athletic is reporting on this. A settlement could also avoid wider political issues. They are saying the UK government has admitted that they have discussed the charges. This comment is absolutely spot on that I just wanted to highlight before we get into the details of why Man City is more and more likely to get punished. This is why state ownership should be banned, because sports watching is happening in front of our eyes and nation states shouldn't be owning football teams. It's a conflict of interest. You can abuse your power as a country to put pressure on the UK government to not punish Manchester City. And how is that fair? How does that uphold sporting integrity in the Premier League? I think it's absolutely dirty and it's a disgrace that this has been allowed to happen. So first, let's take a look at what exactly is Manchester City being charged for. The below table summarizes the charges, where you can see an X. That means that that season Manchester City are being charged. They are being charged for not providing correct financial information between 2010 and 2018. They are being also charged not providing full details of manager compensation from 2010 to 2014. They also breached UEFA financial fair play rules between 2014 and 2018. Also, player compensation hasn't been fully disclosed from 2011 to 2016. They also breached the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules for 3 years in a row. Since 2018, since the Premier League investigation began into Manchester City's 115 charges, they haven't cooperated and assisted the Premier League's investigation. They haven't provided the necessary information, they haven't provided the necessary documents, so they are being charged with that as well. And Manchester City admitted a breach to UEFA and they were sanctioned by UEFA, which is a breach of Premier Premier League rules. In 2014, the Premier League also claims that agreements have been made to pay wages and transfer fees under the table in 2010 and 2011, which seems to be supported by strong evidence. Assuming that this is true, it automatically results in 21 of 32 instances of rule violations being proven in accordance with the below clear violations. So as you can see, the red indicates that they are clearly violating the rules, so 100% guilty in those years. Orange is likely, red is yes, and yellow is unclear. So that's how you should read this table. So these violations by themselves, it would be hard for even the Secret Service to supervise an owner so far thoroughly that it would detect if money is paid through a third party to someone associated with selling a player or with a selling club. And for the Premier League, it's almost impossible to detect these. So these payments under the table for player sales, for player transfers, it will be always seen as a serious offense, but given how old these instances are, and they are still fairly small in the grand scheme of things, these violations alone wouldn't result in Manchester City getting relegated. So what about the other offences? Of course, we will leave the main charge until later, but below sets out the details that seem to be clear. So the Der Spiegel newspaper revealed that Mancini was paid £1.75 million annually as a consultancy fee from a club owned by Manchester City's ultimate owner, on top of his 1.45 million salary. So Mancini, manager at the time of Manchester City, was basically getting more than double his salary in illegal ways, in underhand payments. Secret payments was made in relation to underaged Sancho and Diaz by their parents, and +4 million pounds were paid by owners of Man City to the agent of Yaya Toure. And given the evidence produced through Football League's newspaper or the media outlet, Manchester City cannot, from my view, be expected to make an alternative explanation probable. So in these years, between 2010 and 2016, their financial reports are fraudulent, and they made illegal under-the-table payments through third parties, which are not allowed. So they should be severely punished for these years. So in 2013-14, Manchester City clearly breached the UEFA's 45 million loss limit, but this breach has resulted in a harsh fine from UEFA and should not result in double punishment, because the Premier League could say UEFA already punished Manchester City for that. Of course, the under-the-table payments, the illegal payments that we talked about just before, are not included in these figures. So the calculations are incorrect, and Manchester City will be deemed to have breached the rules, but again, not very significantly. And in addition, it is reported that Manchester City's owner has been involved in transactions with the club, including paying money to the club 3 years before the owner was actually paid by the sponsor. So Man City's owner has stepped in between the sponsor and the club and paid the sponsorship money up front, and then in some cases only been paid by the sponsor 3 years later. Sponsorships comes with a credit risk that sponsor simply does not pay. An upfront payment has a value in itself, as it is a form of a loan. And I mean, it's shady enough that Man City are sponsored by the Emirates airline, which is owned by the same country that owns Manchester City. How is that even legal? That a country owns Man City and they own the main sponsor of Man City. So effectively, the country is just paying Man City whatever they want. And also, by stepping in between Manchester City's sponsors and the club to ensure that Man City are timely paid what they are due, is a service that has a market value that is not insignificant in relation to some sponsorships totaling several £100 million. And it's very shady that the owner of the club and the ruler of Man City is paying Man City directly from his own accounts, the sponsor, Emirates Airlines, pay the owner of Man City 3 years later. So the company should pay Man City directly. It shouldn't come from the owner themselves. And this is very serious because you got a club that is involved in under the table payments to players and managers and agents. As a consequence, they filed wrong, fraudulent and incomplete reports and financial reports as well. They have members of top management coming across as really arrogant and disgraceful in emails, and they haven't flagged up in the involvement of its owners in crucial payments of sponsorship deals over a long time. So what other conclusion could an independent committee come to other than that the club must get a serious sanction? So not a 10 million fine and a 10-point deduction, that's not enough. Man City must be relegated for these very serious offences, because if an owner can get away with this, all Premier League winners will be clubs that cheats. The system wouldn't even remotely work. It takes a huge hacker leak just to get this far. The system wouldn't work. And that's also another issue, that a hacker had to hack these emails and make it public for even this to come to light, and for Man City to be not held accountable 6 years later still is a disgrace to the Premier League and a big hit to the Premier League's integrity. And given how much Manchester City has been able to influence these sponsorship payments, I mean, it's very, very shady and very questionable that the Manchester City's owner has paid money directly to Manchester City before the sponsor has paid Man City. And this raises very significant question marks, of course. So some of these deals probably will be deemed to come from a party over Manchester City's owner have had influence. Of course, this impacts sponsorship payments as well. And when the Court of Arbitration for Sport cleared Manchester City after UEFA banned them from the Champions League for 2 years, do you remember that? UEFA suspended Man City for 2 years from the Champions League. They fought it in court. It went to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and some of the charges were dropped because they were time barred. They expired basically, because in UEFA rules, if the offense is committed more than 5 years ago, then Man City couldn't be found guilty of those offences. But the Premier League doesn't have a time limit. The Premier League doesn't have any time limitation. So Man City will never get away with this defense in front of the independent committee with the Premier League's procedural rules, which are much stricter than the UEFA rules. So in the front of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, it was UEFA's responsibility to prove without any reasonable doubt that Man City are guilty, and there was just not enough proof. And the majority of the panel finds that it did not succeed. UEFA did not succeed in proving beyond any reasonable doubt that Man City are guilty. So UEFA's allegations were dismissed, but the independent committee will not be as lenient in the Premier League. And also, how dirty is this? Man City took a calculated risk and a fine from the Court of Arbitration for Sport by refusing to hand over certain information and documents that Man City had. They would not have done that if the information wasn't incriminating. And going by the Everton ruling, for example, it's obvious how the function of the financial fair play rules will be prioritized, and this can't function if a club can just refuse to provide information to the Premier League. These violations will have taken place during extremely crucial seasons for Manchester City, and they enabled heavy investment in the squad. This is why they have won 6 out of the last 7 Premier League titles, because they built up a club and they built up a squad of players by illegal methods, artificially inflating sponsorships and even fake sponsorships, which we have talked about before. If just some of these sponsorships are questions, Man City breaches its 2014 agreement with UEFA, resulting in that 40 million suspended fine is executed, which in itself results in further breaches of their financial reports, financial account. So the Swedish Rumble claims that Man City could be expelled for 2 seasons from the Premier League, which I think would be a good start for this, and I think that could be actually a fair punishment. So make Man City play in the Championship for 2 seasons, and they don't have a chance to get promoted in the first season, and then in the second season they have a chance to get promoted, or relegate them to League One and get them and give them, you know, that gives them 2 seasons to get promoted to the Premier League either way. And what is really striking is that if Man City wouldn't have concealed these violations so well, the sanctions separately for any of these violations wouldn't have been that harsh, at least as long as just some of the sponsorship deals are challenged. The seriousness is the length of the period during which the violations have been committed. I mean, it's more than 10 years. And when you add up all the effects that any other sanction, then the most harsh seems unreasonable. And the Premier League's punishment will always be looked at with a lens that how severe must be the sanction be to clearly ensure that it's always more favorable to follow the rules than to breach the rules and cheat. Man City have years and years of corner cutting, illegal payments, under the hand payments, and refusal to even cooperate with the Premier League. How can anything less than relegation come into question in order to justify a system or uphold a system that can work? Otherwise, for any other club in the future, it would be more beneficial to cheat and potentially get away with it, take a chance of not being caught, and if they are caught, then the full extent of cheating can never be proven. That will be the more favorable outcome than complying with the rules if the punishment is not relegation and a very substantial fine, which should be like £100 million or something crazy like that. Relegation is the only punishment that would deter in the future clubs to go down the route of Manchester City. And Man City shouldn't be allowed to play in Europe in that 1 or 2 year period when they're playing in the Championship. Otherwise, it's not a real punishment if they are allowed to compete and try to win the Champions League in the process as well. So thanks for watching, guys. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Have a nice day. See you later. Goodbye.